Cyberability savvy, the quickest way to go from cyber confused to cyber savvy.
Hello, I'm your host, Michala Liavaag. Our guest today is Chris White, who's a police detective inspector in the police. It's really great to have you with us today, so thank you for joining.
No problems. Hi, Michala. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I left college and started a career in computing with a multinational technology company. I then joined the police in the mid-90s, experienced in various departments, focusing on technological roles. Always been looking for solutions and keeping up with technology. I joined the South East Regional Organised Crime Unit as a police cybersecurity advisor and a pro-event sergeant. The work contributed to delivering the national cybersecurity strategy, where I worked within the private sector, raising the awareness of cybersecurity, coaching and encouraging positive behaviour and change within organisations. I also assisted during cyber incidents and also managing the offenders responsible for those incidents. But more recently, I've joined the Cyber Resilience Centre for the South East as Head of Cyber and Innovation. It's part of the National Police Chiefs Council and the National Cybercrime Programme, which is a not-for-profit police, private and academic partnership tackling cybercrime. And we're providing solutions to help charities, businesses, small, medium enterprise and micro businesses to protect themselves in this digital age.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Chris, for introducing the audience to you for those who haven't come across you already. I'm really curious, did you actually always want to be in the police force?
Well, I went to school and college like most people, and then I had a few jobs after leaving college. One of those was involved working in a big computer company where I think I got the bug a little bit. But parents are role models, aren't they? So they said, you need to go out and get a proper job. And I looked at the police force at the time. I had a few friends that were looking at it as well. And I applied and was successful, joined up, and the rest is history, I guess.
Right, okay. Thinking about, the lessons that you've learned in that journey, because you must have seen a range of stuff in your career. Did you really sort of get involved on the forensic side as well, or more the sort of investigation lead?
So yeah, when you join the police, you learn your trade for the first 2 years, and it is forever learning because you just come across new things every day. But I took a few exams and a few courses which enabled me to deliver short-term problem solving, which is generally you phone 999 and people come along and solve the short-term problem that's there in front of you. Then if you get repeat occurrences, then it becomes a long-term problem that also needs a different team to solve it, which could be anything from congregating kids underneath street lights on the street corners, for instance, or sitting on park benches. You could amend when the lights come on and off, you can remove the park bench. Some of the greatest examples I've seen are maybe on a Friday night where people congregate in a certain area and it could be a hotspot for some violence. And then the local council jointly has turned that waiting area into cobbled stones and basic things like that. People don't like to stand on cobbled stones, so you've designed out the crime. If people come out of pubs shouting and annoying local neighbours, certain pubs and police forces have given free lollipops. It normalises the sugar levels, and when you've got something in your mouth, you tend not to shout. It's like some basic solutions which I always annotate straight over to cyber, where you talk about firewalls and ports and technical things like that, and you lose quite a lot of your audience. But if you relate it to conventional issues that we're all comfortable with, like fire and floods and fights, for instance, people get it. It is quite interesting.
Yeah, and of course the analogy that most people always think about is, the burglaries in terms of people, going down the street and knocking at the door.
When I was young and out on patrol, the sergeant used to send us out at night time and we'd be looking for vulnerabilities, weaknesses in housing estates, whether it is a car with a window left open or the car door's not locked, or on a hot summer's night, people generally leave their first floor windows open, but their ground floor windows dead closed for obvious reasons. And where we'd find those weaknesses or vulnerabilities, we would make efforts to notify them so people can make themselves safe again. Compare it to the online world, it's vulnerability assessments or pen testing, that they will look at ports that you might have accidentally left open, or you were eager to open up the router, plug it into the internet and get going, that you've maybe not configured it or set it up correctly. So a port is open or closed in technical world, but a port in the conventional world is a front door. It has a purpose, doesn't it? You walk in and out of the front door. You close it when you don't need it. An upstairs window in the bathroom, the purpose of that is ventilation. You open it when you need it, you close it when you don't need it. So you may have ports on your routers which you need for specific purposes, and it's not the massive technical issue, is it, where we want to talk securely online. It may be the kids want to play on the Xbox and they need a certain port open. But if you don't have kids, don't have that port open. If you're not using the Xbox, don't open it. But sometimes these things are set up when they're delivered, and we don't always have the confidence to understand what's going on inside that little box, which we think is complicated. So everything's comparable to conventional issues, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. The only thing I would say is that even if you don't have kids, you might still be playing on that Xbox. As a lifelong gamer myself, me and my husband, yeah, we're all over that. So I'm also interested about that transition where you've seen, the criminals moving from real world onto online. And then necessitating the setup of the regional organised crime units. Could you perhaps just tell us a little bit about your experience with that?
So yeah, as I joined, there was the traditional conventional crime. There's always going to be shoplifting, there's always going to be car crashes, there's always going to be people going missing, but crime trends change over time. And what we've seen is that fraud grew because people found it easy to misrepresent things or deceive someone into generally getting their money. And then computers came about. And then I think, when did it first start? You'd get junk mail through your letterbox, didn't you? Trying to sell you pyramid selling or trying to say things that are probably too good to be true. And the ability, it's a manual process, isn't it? Putting a letter into the post box and then putting a stamp on it. Emails turned up. Then you could start sending scams by volume. And we all relate to them as phishing emails, and we get spammed a lot. There's, I think, 165 million phishing emails going around the world every day. So the expectation is that the firewalls are definitely working really hard, but you are going to receive some. You are going to receive a percentage of phishing emails, and you just need to know what to do with it. So criminals have found that to be a very easy method to scam people and businesses, organizations out of money. They don't know the difference right from the beginning, whether or not you're a cash-rich business or whether or not you're a small one-man band or a charity or a school even or a hospital. They are just scanning everything to see what the weakness is, what the insecurity is, and then they take their next phase. It's the reconnaissance stage, isn't it? Looking out there to see who's weak, who's vulnerable, and then we'll see what we do next.
Yeah. I was actually just watching on the news last night. They did a piece on the increase in scams of people setting up duplicate charity sites to help, victims in the Ukraine. So diverting those funds, and they had somebody from Save the Children on, and I know that's something that when I used to work in the charity sector, we were always very mindful about, people potentially posing as the charity and siphoning those funds off. Is that something that you've worked with on that side at all?
Yeah, I got asked that question yesterday. I spoke to a charity and they said, well, why would a criminal come after me? I'm a charity. Surely I've got a heart of gold. They don't know you're a charity at that early stage. And that is if you're actually dealing with a human offender, because we have these things called botnets or bots, which are just automated programs that are deployed, and probably the person that's deployed is having a sleep. It's their turn to sleep, but the botnets can just do their devious stuff automatically and continuously, and they don't know who you are. They will just attack where they find that weakness or vulnerability. So to say, surely people know I'm a charity, or I know I've got no money, why are they going to attack me? There might not actually be a person on the end of that. It could be an automated machine doing it.
I think the other thing, though, that particularly with the charity sector is we tend to trust and believe that everyone's in it, doing the right thing. But one of the things that I was always concerned about was volunteering in a charity is a wonderful way to gain access to things that you wouldn't otherwise. And that sort of insider threat piece, I think, is something that charities don't really like to think about, or other organisations actually too.
I think that's a very good point. I mean, you meant the insider threat, that you could be the malicious insider, that someone's wanted to apply for that job to get into that organisation to do something. You get the accidental insider, they've got a heart of gold, they're doing the right thing, but they're just pressing buttons and they don't realise And then you've got the untrained insider that hasn't been told what, I guess, your local rules are. And certainly some businesses don't have a training department, and therefore they can't facilitate that or provide that provision. But I guess you go back to the Information Commission's office, because they're seeing quite a few of these incidents and they're coming up with the best practice, which is a massively good thing to do. And they set a precedent, haven't they, that if any new employee that turns up at an organisation should get training within 1 month of being there. So they should understand what you can do, what you can't do, what the company policies are, and it should be backed up with an annual refresher programme. And I know a lot of organisations don't realise that, but it does make common sense, doesn't it? Because I remember when every new building or new organisation I went to, you always got told who the first aiders were, where the first aid box is, where the fire alarm panels are, what to do, where the evacuation point is. But cybersecurity, we've not got into that comfort zone yet.
No, it's interesting that you say that as well, because I was just writing a bit yesterday on the analogy between, fire drills and cybersecurity response exercising. That again, people are kind of like, well, why do you need to do this? But it's about building in that sort of capability and that practiced response. I'm guessing this is something again that you've got experience with.
Yes, so health and safety, first aid, whether or not decades ago, it was the red fire extinguishers, wasn't it, in the corner of the room? They were the right thing to do to prevent your building from burning down. Some people did it, some people didn't do it. Then the government mandated it and made it legislation. And now fire safety, fire drills, fire alarm panels, fire extinguishers, they're everywhere. And then we've moved on to the first aid, where you have a significant number of people in an organisation that are first aid at work trained. I'm sure cyber, it will be coming. I know there's been chat about it from the insurance sector in the last couple of months, where a lot of companies have gone for insurance, and the insurance sector have basically said, you're too risky, I'm not even going to cover you unless you do this, this and this. But they said, I want insurance, I'm a paying customer. And they said, but you're too much of a risk. You've not taken any of your strategy seriously.
Yeah, that's again, I was looking at a thread on LinkedIn just yesterday about that topic, where in order to change behaviours of organisations, it needs to be more painful to try and get insurance versus doing the right thing and investing in your cybersecurity, because a lot of organisations just like, it's only going to cost X amount if something happens, we'll deal with it, and carry on taking those risks. So I think the insurance industry can really help make a difference here.
And you've got risk avoidance, risk transfer. Some people are war chesting, so they said it's inevitable I'm going to get a cyber incident, so I'm going to put a couple of £1 million in a treasure chest and wait for that cyber incident because I've got to pay out. But then I also meet a lot of businesses, a lot of directors that want to do the right thing. So they pay for cybersecurity, and they also train. So people, processes and technology, they look at the technology, they keep it up to date, they look at the processes within their company and have a gap analysis, find out where we are and where we need to get to, whether or not it's a compliance issue, that there's a contract that you need to bid for, whether it's a government contract and you need cyber essentials, or whether or not you're going to be a merchant and you need to comply with PCI DSS because Visa and MasterCard want you to. So many different legislative issues about doing the right thing. And then beyond all of that, you've got the trust and reputation of your organisation that you want to protect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the most important things, certainly for the charity sector. I would be interested in your take on that from a private sector perspective in terms of the organisations you're working with, because there's evidence that some organisations, whilst they have an initial hit on their share price, they actually recover and come back stronger. What's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, I've dealt with a couple of companies. So one company said, do you know what? Yes, my share prices are going to go down and the chief executive board are going to get a grilling from the shareholders. And they said, we'll deal with that because give it a couple of weeks and our share prices will bounce back. But then I've spoken to other companies where trust reputation has been irreversibly damaged and the shareholders have dispensed with certain members of the board because they said, well, you should be doing better. Cyber, it is just like any other threat, risk, vulnerability that most businesses see these days. And if I can't trust you to do that seriously, then let's get someone else in who can. So it's both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, yeah. And just thinking again about the fact that you're seeing that from board members, have you seen an increase in the awareness of their responsibility for cybersecurity risk?
Yes, I have. So we see different organisations across the world are being involved in cyber incidents. There's big impact, but everybody is looking at the lessons learned and then comparing it to their own organisation. So certainly, I keep an eye on some of the ICO enforcement action and the recommendation actions, and I do encourage some of the businesses to review them as well, because they're quite handy to compare to your own organizations. Some senior executives will have a cybersecurity policy, and we've got the boardroom toolkits which are there, which just raise the awareness. You've got charities, you've got schools, because schools are a business, aren't they, effectively? Yes, they get given a budget and they've got to spend that budget wisely. And if there is a cyber incident which is impacting on the students or the teachers, they need to respond accordingly, like you would like in any on-fire plan. I've seen good leaders, I've seen developing leaders, and I've seen lots of good leaders. Some come with strengths and weaknesses, and I think you need to have a team surrounding you. Cybersecurity is not a bolt-on anymore to just somebody's job. Cybersecurity is a full-time academic occupation now, and to get it right, you need someone in, whether or not it's outsourced or whether or not it's in-house on the payroll, but someone needs to be responsible for cybersecurity. It is now a proper accountable responsibility.
Do you think that we might start seeing, and this is a bit of a personal thing, but I feel really strongly that boards need somebody who is really championing sort of information assurance, cybersecurity, in the same way that you will often see, non-executive director roles for a background in finance and corporate governance. I want to see people start asking for people with the security. I think in the past year, only seen one of those. What's your take on that?
You're dead right, because if you've got someone that's come from a maths background, then they're going to know the company's finances inside out, aren't they? And not a lot is going to get past them, which is going to be wrong. They're going to make sure, it's the old saying, isn't it? All the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and they're going to be shipshape, aren't they? That's just the way it is. We all have strengths and weaknesses. There could be some older directors of more mature businesses that when they started at that organization at grassroots level, and they've done a fantastic job and got a promotion all the way through their career, and they're now leading that organization, that all the company which they were in charge of when they were on the shop floor is probably not the way the company is now. And there's a lot of devices that have now appeared to make life easier, like industrial control systems, operational technology, computers, emails. We don't really have too many calculators and office desks anymore because they're all embedded within Excel spreadsheets. So you're in charge of a company that's just changed massively, and you probably underestimate the reliance that your organization has on computers. You don't understand how quickly they can be very disruptive and impactful. So to give, again, real life examples, chatting to a multi-international organization that had a cyber incident in Australia. Now, if they don't respond and protect and isolate and contain their organization efficiently, we all hear this golden hour. I know that they had an incident in Australia because of the way their network's set up. If they didn't respond accordingly, within 4 minutes, London was going to be offline as well, because that's how quick worms or cyber incidents can spread through corporate networks. Again, I was like, well, that's not going to happen to me, is it? Why me? It could be anyone that's connected to the internet.
Yeah, just as collateral damage as well. Yeah, I've spoken about that in another episode. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things you said there. You mentioned about the reliance on people who know IT and people thinking, oh, it's IT's job. And in my experience, I've often found that some IT can be the worst offenders on the cybersecurity side, and that there really is a difference. You can have that sort of conflicting objectives between IT from an availability point of view, and when you're investigating an incident. Is there something you'd like to sort of share from your lessons learned on that point?
Yes, there are some people that get complacent because they're doing very repetitive tasks, and it's got to remain fresh, and sometimes it isn't the most exciting of topics to talk about, is it, cybersecurity? So you've definitely got to have some people within the team that know how to articulate to the chief executive board level of what the current risks are, because they I think you speak to most IT executives and they say, I need more budget. I need to spend on the latest equipment because it does the latest fandandy dozy protection, whether it's an intrusion detection device or a prevention device or a hybrid of both. I need it for this company to make my life easier. So generally, IT security want to turn most organizations into Fort Knox. Now, that will upset the sales director, because if I can't get people into my business to buy things, then I don't have any revenue. And it will also upset the workforce, because if they can't do anything which is in relation to the business objectives, so I can't get on certain systems because you keep blocking me, I can't get to certain websites, or I have to take 5 minutes going through lots of different MFA or 2FA and MFA, it becomes an obstruction and a hurdle to the smooth operating of that business. So there's got to be proportionate IT security in relation to what those business objectives are. Everyone thinks, well, IT just makes life difficult. Obviously, IT security would say, no, I'm keeping you safe. IT is expensive. No, you need to allocate a percentage of your budget now. You pay for a security guard, don't you? In offices and shops, a security guard is a visible physical deterrent. It would challenge unexpected visitors. You have receptionists and they screen visitors, don't they? They screen phone calls. They let pre-approved guests past the security gate. So you do have some sort of security there. But when you say IT security budget, well, I only pay on what's needed, but everyone else gets an allocated protected budget. I think people need to, on the chief executive board now, is really look at how they separate their budgets and allocate a percentage of turnover now to cybersecurity, because it's the quickest and easiest thing that's going to take you offline. Very disruptive to a business and damage your reputation.
Yeah, no, agreed. Have you got a sense at the moment of the organisations that are doing that, what sort of percentage they are allocating?
Yeah, I'd love to find that out, but people are protective of their budgets, aren't they? For obvious reasons. But certainly, if you're going to be proactive and proactively mitigate threats, then you're going to be thinking ahead, aren't you? If you're going to be knee-jerking and responding to instances, you're always going to be playing catch-up. Some organisations I speak to, they're still on Windows XP and Windows 7 because they've not realised the dangers. So they've not, when they buy a new computer, they're not considering what is the end of life of that software or the end of life of that computer. They don't even see it as, well, this computer is just going to last until it blows up or breaks. They don't see the issue of unsupported operating systems. Actually, that's the day when you need to unplug it and get a new one, or probably 6 months before, so you don't have any disruption with conflicting software systems to your business objectives. You do an update and then something else goes offline because it's just not compatible. As we develop and as generations grow up, I speak to a lot of youngsters and I say, so cybersecurity, what do you understand about that? And they said, that's having a really good password. So if I speak to an adult and say, how many characters as long as your passwords? They generally say, 8 to 10. If I speak to a younger generation, they say, yeah, 18 characters, uppercase, lowercase, symbols, numbers, or I might use a password manager. Now that's good. They're using a password manager as well, which is probably going to be set up with 2FA or multi-factor authentication. But if you speak to an adult, and I know I'm being very general and vague here, but an adult doesn't really trust a password manager because I'm giving all my passwords to someone or something, I don't know who they are. I want to be in possession of my stuff because that's just a generational thing. We like to be in possession of stuff. So we like to save all our precious family photos, don't we, on a hard drive, which is in our house. So I'm not too happy about this cloud thing. But youngsters, they're all over it, aren't they? Because it's what they trust, it's what they've been born into. They know no different.
I've got mixed views on this one, actually. Yes, they're definitely more sort of cyber savvy than certainly my generation. However, I think there seems to be a distinction between, you've got those who are sort of learning good cyber hygiene practices through school, through friends, whatever it might be, but they're tripping over into actually delving into cybersecurity as something and learning it as a potential career. I feel there's a bit of a schism there.
Yeah, I think it's a generational thing, isn't it? I mean, when we came through certain generations from the 80s, 90s, noughties, and now the 10s, There was different campaigns, wasn't there? We had the Talk to Frank, which was the drug campaign. We've had the Drink Aware, which is the drink campaign. You had the smoking, anti-smoking campaign. And at the moment, I think people are actually realising there are some healthier alternatives. And I'm pretty sure there will be a cyber campaign soon talking about being cyber savvy, cyber hygiene.
Yeah, okay. What would you say, in your experience, is the kind of key lesson that you would want to share with people about cybersecurity?
I'd say the basics. A lot of the offenders which we've dealt with, sometimes they're not testing their advanced skills because they don't need to yet, because we're leaving the door open. The weaknesses are still there and vulnerabilities. And the national government strategy, when we talk about always updating your devices, well, if a device is telling you there's some recommended action, it's because it knows there's a weakness. The manufacturers have fixed it, and we're just waiting for us end users to install it. So the basic things from smartphones, there are lives on our smartphones. But if you go to a business, we've just got bigger smartphones. When I talk to people about you've got a big server or you've got a big computer, and now you've got a smartphone, it's just a smaller version of it that fits into your pocket. They will all be programmed to tell you when they need updates. Some of us advanced users have ticked the box to say, can you do an automatic update? Just when you plug your device in and connect it to Wi-Fi, just let it take in all the updates, because you're removing all of the vulnerabilities and weaknesses and exploits that you never even knew existed, and you're making your safe overnight again. On the laptop's bottom right-hand corner, where time and date is, if it says you're due to install some updates, you get a little orange sign come up, do it. Press the button, and I know you're at work, and it might say, I need to shut down and restart. Brilliant. Restart. Time to get some screen time break and go and put the kettle on. Ideal opportunity, because we've got to look after ourselves as well and forget that we need to get up and walk away from these computers and keep ourselves healthy and exercise. So use that as a good excuse. But certainly in our home lives, when the device says on certain brands, you get the little red circle with the white number in it saying I'm due an update, I wouldn't be doing banking or sensitive emailing or internet surfing on a device that says I'm due an update. I would do the update.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Our lives are on these devices, and we use them for so many services now because everything's, digital by default these days. It's scary, I think, how many people don't realise the importance of updates. The other thing I just want to sort of mention on that, which is perhaps a little bit contentious, but I think it's something that, again, boards need to be alive to, is that if we go the automatic updates route because we're reducing the vulnerabilities in the attack surface, what about the supply chain attacks where we had things like SolarWinds and others? It's really challenging, isn't it?
Yes, and supply chain attacks, where do you start? So certainly, if you run a medium business and you rely on different companies to provide you stuff into your company, you then process and then sell it. I mean, if you're going to apply certain cybersecurity policies and legislation and procedures and framework and governance in your own company, and then you're going to be asking other companies to provide you a service, then you need to readdress your service level agreements or contracts to say that they need to achieve the same. Otherwise, all of the effort, hard work, resources, and finances you put into making yourself, you've just allowed a back door in, because you're going to allow that company sometimes connected to your systems, but you've done the hard work, they might not have. So whereas, I mean, a classic example, isn't it? If you go to the exhibit or a conference at someone else's venue, they will mandate that if you want to come here, then you need to have public liability insurance. And I know some of that's legislative, but there's certain things that you must do if you want to come onto my land. Do the same. If you're allowing people in to provide you services, if they have the incident, you're going to get the tarnished reputation because it's you that can't provide the product or service, but it might not be your fault. So you need to adjust your service level contracts to do what you're doing.
I think that's a really great point about it's your brand, your reputation, even if it isn't actually your fault. Because I can think of so many examples that have been in the news over the past year where it's exactly that. I think it's something, again, that people need to be very mindful of and include something around in their risk registers that perhaps they may not be already. A lot of people, I've certainly found, think, cybersecurity is difficult. There's the jargon that people I think some people maybe use it deliberately to make it sound, all fancy and difficult from an ego perspective for themselves. But from, again, a risk perspective, it's really important that we use sort of plain language. What would you say is an important trait for somebody who is in a situation they're on the board, they've got this person talking jargon to them? How would you suggest that they deal with this?
Certainly, if you're going to describe a cyber incident and you're from a cyber background or a techie background, don't use jargon. You will lose your audience because not everybody is at the same knowledge levels of you. So use simple language to explain what is going on. Even when sometimes I see people having a technical to technical conversation, because of the amount of different frameworks and the fact that it's a borderless problem, it's just like me having a conversation in English to speaking to someone in Mandarin. I might misunderstand the dialect or the translation because that's not my first language. So keep it simple, articulate what the problem is. Don't be scared to check saying, this is what I understand you to be telling me the problem is. And if there's a translation issue or a misunderstanding, then allow the corrections to take place so everybody understands what the problem is. Don't get carried away on jargon and saying, oh, well, it was an IP misconfiguration. You lose people when you start talking like that. Keep it simple.
Great, thank you. You do all this work, you do the police and everything. Do you want to maybe just tell us a bit more now about your work with the Cyber Resilience Centre?
Yeah, so it was a Home Office project for the National Police Chiefs Council a couple of years ago, whereby it got to the point where cybersecurity is deemed as quite expensive, and those that really need help with cybersecurity are probably down the bottom end of the scale of the business size, as in the micro, small, medium enterprises, maybe the company organisations that have got less than 250 staff. Now, the whole point of crime prevention is accessible and affordable and proportionate. And some people realised that they hadn't set their computers up correctly to keep their business safe. They would pick up the phone after they've gone through that confusing landscape of search engines to try and find some cybersecurity help. They spoke to someone and they just have gone, wow, that's the quote, is it? And they probably end the phone call and then they run the risk. Now, we all know with supply chain instance that you're only as strong as your weakest link, and small businesses do support larger businesses. Now, I know larger businesses will have some sort of outsourced IT help, or they will have IT on their payroll, and they generally can respond efficiently and get configurations right the first time round. And smaller businesses just don't have that luxury. Normally the managing director of small businesses, head of sales, head of finance, head of complaints, head of fleet, the head of everything, just like we are at home, aren't we? And we're head of catering at home. Literally, the Cyber Resilience Centres, we're utilising the student talent pipeline of all of the universities across the country. So if whatever I do in the southeast, I look after Surrey, Sussex, Hampshire and Thames Valley, is replicated across the country ×9. So we chop up the country into manageable chunks, and the 43 police forces all have cybercrime units, and there's 9 cyber resilience centres across the UK. So we're utilising the students or undergrads from universities that the majority of the time they're at the National Cybersecurity Centre certified universities doing either cybercrime or computer science courses. Now, these students, generally, need employment to get them through university. Sometimes they use it on beer tokens, sometimes they use it on other things. But generally, they would seek work, so they can work with us. We screen and mentor and coach and vet them, so not everyone's got onto the scheme, but certainly we have our own in-house certified ethical hackers. And if a client comes to the centre to say, look, I've set my computers up, I was very eager, can you double check, because you shouldn't be marking your own homework. So we can do something called vulnerability assessment, which is realistically what hackers do. They look at your systems from the outside. They will look to see whether or not there's any holes in your armor, whether or not your routers have got little holes where people can just get into your business. There's a lot of remote working at the moment where you can see you're at home, but you can see exactly what you can see if you were in the office. And that's got to be set up safely, because if you can see it at home, then if it's not configured correctly, then anybody can see it at home. So the Cyber Resilience Centre, we look at the triangle, don't we? We've got the people. So are the people trained correctly? Do they understand the risks? We look at the processes. Do you have the correct processes in place? Is there a gap? Have we forgotten things like acceptable use of your internet? To password policies. And then we look at the technology as well. Has the technology been set up correctly? So we've got 9 services, which is very affordable to all, whether it's small business, bigger business. We won't dismiss the larger business, and we definitely don't dismiss charities either. But we're a police-led organisation, not for profit, so we have very little overheads, therefore we can keep our prices massively down. And it's something that the police should do. It's crime prevention, but now as cyber has got a little bit bigger, I think cybercrime, the last count I saw, was about 51-52% of all crime in the UK. So we need to do something about it, because the majority of the incidents that I review every week are preventable. Whether it was a longer password, whether or not it was your passwords appeared on a breach, which again is not your fault, and somebody's used that password. If you had 2FA turned on, even though someone knows your password, they're never going to get access to the code that's sent to your phone. So having some of these cybersecurity basics in place, people think, well, I've got a good password. What's 2FA going to help me? When we look at various layers of defense, if you are asleep one night and you wake up in the morning and you see a 6-digit code on your phone, it's clear that someone knows your main password. So that is your notification to change your password. So when you originally join whichever organisation it is, you join by your email, you join by a password, and then it says what other security protection do you want. You'll have the options of 2-factor authentication, 2FA for short, or MFA, multi-factor authentication. You can either opt to have a second level of defense, which is send a text message to your phone, or you can have one of these things called an authenticator app. So every 30 seconds, the code will change and you need to write in the correct code to then get into that account. Now, if your password is being breached in a data compromise, no one is going to get past that second layer of defense without the code. So if you have that notification on your phone, they didn't get in, but that's when you should change your password.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I was aware, again, talking to somebody recently, that some of the attackers, they're literally sort of spamming the code, hoping that when people are kind of in that dozy state and they just want the notifications to shut up, that they'll then sort of accept, because there's also the option where you have the push notification where you just click on approve rather than having to enter the code into a system. So yeah, different options come with just slightly different risks.
I see a lot of social media and account takeovers, email account takeovers, where just simply any sort of 2FA or MFA hasn't even been turned on or enabled. In my view, the majority of those would have been preventable by just having that second layer of defense turned on.
What do you think is stopping people from doing it? Is it just not understanding the need for it? Is it, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's an opt-in, whereas I think it should be turned on by default, opt out if you're not happy. Because some people's awareness levels, they don't understand what 2FA or MFA is, because those 6 letters alone, that's jargon.
Yeah.
And now I know you and I completely understand MFA and 2FA. It's like second nature to us. But for someone that doesn't even recognise that terminology or abbreviation, it needs to be articulated when they join or create an account on whichever organisation it is, what the advantages and disadvantages are of it. Disadvantages to 2FA, well, if I'm trying to log into a system and I've lost my phone, or I'm in an area where I have no phone signal, or I've run out of data, those are minor hurdles. But they're the only downsides I could see. And obviously you fall for a scam where they're asking you for your 2FA is the extra one. But multi-factor authentication, where it's an authenticator app, the hurdles to that are, I now have to download something to my phone. I might not have the necessary storage space. I don't understand it. It's another app. Do I really need it? So those are the sort of hurdles we see. But certainly I think it should be opt in by default, opt out if you don't want it, rather than the other way round where, well, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, no, I really agree with you on that. I tend to have a bit of an issue with some organisations that I may deal with where they don't even offer the options. And there was one particular organisation where I wrote to them and said, they could make a huge difference if they were to implement the feature and turn it on by default. Their response was that yes, they know that's good security practice, but they thought they would alienate a lot of their demographic. And to me, it's still kind of like, well, at least give us the option to opt in for those of us who want it. But do you think there's room for other levers for organisations, to sort of help persuade them to do the right thing and giving customers the tools to help protect themselves?
Yeah, many answers for that one. So yes, I've dealt with a few organisations where that very reason was cited. I'm not put 2FA on my platform because it will upset the customer journey. If I upset the customer, then potentially they can go to another outlet and buy what I need to buy. Well, I know there's some issues with 2FA or MFA does cost money, but it is brand protection and it is improved cybersecurity. If there's an organisation that doesn't offer it, can I get that somewhere else? The days of alienating certain end users that don't understand it, well, every bank has it. And if you're going to be banking online, you have to use it. The generation is getting to that point now where people are starting to understand it when it's imposed on them. And I don't think we've got people going, well, I'm not doing that if I have to put my phone number in. I think those days are gone now.
Yeah, I've certainly seen a shift over the past 10 years around that there'd been quite a lot of objection at that point. But I think with the prevalence partly of social media as well and the different apps, people are just getting used to having to provide some information to operate on a platform. There's an area I wanted to talk to you about that's nothing to do with Cyber Resilience Centre, but about your work volunteering and helping bring that cybersecurity talent through, because everyone talks about the skill gap. I think it's actually more of an experience gap that, we do have lots of people now who are coming through the pipeline. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about some of your work in this area?
Yeah, in my previous role, we worked as I'm a STEM ambassador, and we've worked with the younger generation, whether it was secondary, and then we've actually done some work in primary schools as well. We're just teaching younger people the positive and ethical methods and usage of computers rather than some of the stuff that they can find quite easily on Google and YouTube. So certainly I've seen some youngsters that have learned how to moderate things or modify things to their own benefit, which would be others' loss. And then they develop those skills. So science, technology, engineering and maths, pretty much computers fall into all of those areas. And we've worked with quite a few schools just teaching kids the proper and correct way to use computers. And it was quite interesting because all of the adults there, whether it was the teachers or the parents, they all learned as well, because they said, we've never been taught this stuff. So how are we supposed to teach this to our kids? And I do sort of always relate back to the 10 Commandments, when parents have always told their kids, you shouldn't swear, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't hit. But not many parents have had that thou shalt not commit the Computer Misuse Act chat because they don't know it themselves. So doing the STEM stuff is good, because you can see kids going, okay, so I knew a lot of people did that, but I didn't know that was against the law in the UK, and that's under the Computer Misuse Act, because it hasn't really featured in lesson planning yet or parent planning.
You know that I'm a gamer all the way through my life, and there was that moment where people would be, started with like cheat codes and things, but learning the different techniques to get an edge on their competition, honing their skills through that would then inevitably mean that they could go either way in terms of the opportunities to make easy money or not from that ethical point of view, which is why I think the ethics being taught early is so important. What have you seen recently in terms of the schemes that are helping those who have developed their skills but perhaps have started to go down sort of wrong path, the criminal path, the easy path from a finance point of view, to help bring them back and get them into the cybersecurity pipeline to help defend businesses?
Trickery and cheat has been around for way before I was even born, and it's an age-old. Some people class it as a skill, but it's a trait, isn't it? Not everyone chooses that journey. So, certainly Years ago, I used to play online gaming, and yeah, I got frustrated and annoyed because you'd be shot, for instance, by the invisible character, the invisible enemy, and they've learned how to make themselves invisible so that they can walk around and get the high score. And that's all it is. They want the high score, they want to win. Whoever starts a game and doesn't want to win it, that's the whole point of playing sometimes, isn't it? You want to be the best that you can be. Some people then have advantages, whether or not they've practiced. Practice makes perfect, their old expressions, or they practice through cheating. Yes, it does go two ways. People get addicted to it, and then they think, I can't not lose, and they may go down that pathway because they see it as an easier option rather than, well, we look at athletes, don't we? They get up at 5 a.m. and they train and they work hard, play hard. Certainly the government has looked, and in cyber, things change overnight, don't they? And it's very, very hard to manage out something that isn't even a problem yet because it's not been invented. So some new 0 day won't even be around till a week's time, and then we all have to respond as a world to that 0 day and correct things quite quickly. Yeah. So the basics of positive ethical use of computers is that one person's benefit is another person's loss. If we teach that, it is taught in so many conventional things, isn't it? That if you want to pass an exam, you have to study hard. Yes, there's always been that where you can cheat and pass the exam, but that's down to you as a human, isn't it? Have you done it the right and proper way? So teaching people the basics, and cyber is just another one of those bolt-on things that, yes, you might find a hole in someone's armor. There are bug bounty programs. There are disclosure programs whereby you can notify that company. You may get rewarded, or you may just think, wow, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the Robin Hood. Teachers, professionals, cybersecurity experts, there's a whole host of people from a whole manner of organizations. You can look at cyber choices, for instance. These are different campaigns where we're talking to people and just getting them to consider and make the right cyber choice.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thinking about the example recently where, they thought their kid was just gaming, but actually they were hacking organizations. What advice would you give to parents on how they can sort of help and support and watch out for what their children are doing online?
So there are some signs, like anything, when you may think things are going wrong, there are some indications, but certainly difficult conversations to have with kids when you don't know the subject matter yourself. I would suggest start around the dinner table when you're having that conversation. There are some checklists that you can download off of some websites where you can encourage the right conversation if it's certainly an area where you don't really know it, and have those conversations around the dinner table. Find out what their interests are, find out what areas of the internet they're going to, find out what excites them, because they're probably up in their room and you're thinking, do you know what, they're safe up there, aren't they? They're not out, they're not trying cigarettes, they're not drinking, they're not smashing up bus shelters, they're up in their room, they're safe. It's a different sort of safe because they could be up to different things, or they might be just enjoying themselves and developing some of their skills. But certainly it's an area where if you are unaware, that you don't know what's going on, and I think as most parents would like to know what their kids are doing, like to know what their interests are, because you can help, you can develop, you can open up new doors and provide new opportunities, and where they might not be going in that direction, you can definitely steer them back into that direction.
No, that's really helpful. We'll include a link to some of those checklists in the show notes, actually. So it's been a really fascinating conversation, Chris, with your sort of wealth of experience in this field and the different sort of things that you see. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of actions that people can take away from this chat today. One of the things I always like to ask my guests here is, what 3 things would they like to recommend to our audience?
Yeah, I guess I've selected movies this time. Blade Runner, I've always liked that movie. It's ages ago. I think it was back in the 80s, wasn't it, that film was produced, and there was flying cars, technology. It was just a good film. And when I look at some of the things that happened in that film, they're starting to happen now. War games, I guess I'm in cybersecurity, and that film is quite impactful. The good old game of tic-tac-toe, you can't win it. And it took a computer a long time to realise you just can't win it. And then, I don't know, I like comedy, humour. Some of the American Pie series, that was just quite funny, just to chill, relax and laugh a lot.
Yeah, which I guess you really need actually in cybersecurity, because it is a very high pressure environment with lots of horrible stuff going on. So being able to chill out, relax is so important, isn't it?
Always look after number one.
To close then, is there one piece of advice you want people to remember from today's episode as they go off into their organisations?
Keep things simple. Make sure everyone understands what it is that you're trying to communicate with them, and double check with them that they understand that is what you wanted them to do.
Perfect. So where can our listeners find you online?
So you can jump onto a search engine, type in Cyber Resilience Centre for the South East, or just type www.secrc.co.uk. You can see products and services that we offer, or there's a contact us page, and then you can drop us a message and we can get in touch and help you out.
Brilliant, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, because it's been really great talking to you.
No problems. Thank you.